What is up? What is up? Episode 22 of the Cougar Digest podcast. I am Rob Sellers, publisher of Cougar Digest, joined as always by Kevin, Gatlin, and sometimes by Blake when we remember to invite him. What's up, guys? How y'all doing this evening?
Doing good. Good to see everybody again. We don't do this enough.
We got to start picking it up a bit, and I agree with that.
We have to pick this up a little bit more, just to get things out there. But doing good. Happy for the win last night, and looking forward to this weekend also.
Yep, doing well as well, guys. Just about had 7 different heart attacks last night, but around 4 a.m. my blood pressure finally came down enough and my heart rate was low enough that I could go to sleep. Got a couple hours in before work this morning, so sleepy but doing all right.
Yeah, easy to wake up after that win, at least, right? Yeah. Lost in overtime, you'd have been like, not easy to wake up.
Would have made that alarm a little tougher to get up to this morning.
Well, it was kind of tough to go to sleep also, just being so amped up, and the game was kind of late. It was tough to go to bed last night also. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. I was up late, just like trying to calm myself down from a panic attack.
Blake, what time was your first class this morning there, buddy?
It wasn't too bad. It was at 11:30. I didn't go to sleep until probably 3 last night.
11:30?
Come on.
To be fair, I like to eat breakfast, so I woke up at about 9. Wait, 3 to 9 is not ideal, but
You like to eat brunch.
I like to eat breakfast.
Brunch.
That's an all-time college kid quote.
I like to let my breakfast settle before I have to start thinking. That's fair. Hey.
There you go.
Captain Crunch, there you go. College life.
Breakfast of champions right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Blake, what'd you think of the game last night? Obviously, you guys were dialed in. What's up?
Yeah, well, I watched at my friend's apartment and we got a noise complaint. So it was definitely took some years off my life. But I thought, I say this a lot, but I feel like every week we keep proving more and more that we're built for March. That's a March performance, getting down 6 and then hitting. I tweeted out the video, 3 straight threes. Man. I mean, you couldn't ask for more.
That was almost the biggest moment of the game, probably. I know there was a lot of big moments in the game, but those 3 threes in a row after they were struggling at that point, man, it just really kind of rejuvenated everybody, the team, the fan, but everybody's like, okay, now we're settling back in. Let's roll.
I love the quote also from Coach Sampson. There's no upsets on the road. And I love that mindset that he has.
Yeah, it's become quite the controversy the last day since the halftime interview, and he was short with the interviewee or interviewer, and a lot of people have been discussing on the board today in terms of why was he short, and I get both sides of it. I really do.
He's Coach Sampson, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Blake, did I not tell you early on?
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Exactly. No offense to anybody involved, and I think anybody that listens to this that's in the media will completely understand it. I told Blake early on, if you have a question for Coach Sampson, great, ask it, but make sure it's not a silly question or make sure it's pertinent, or he will give you the business on a silly question. Now, he's easier on the younger crowd. He understands you guys are in school and learning and all that, so I think he takes it easier. But he does not hesitate to roast somebody if you ask a silly or dumb question to him. He will let you know, and then he'll come back, of course, and soften it out and answer your question. But he's gonna let you know you asked a silly question first.
Play hard. I love it.
So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but since Blake brought it up, I had been meaning to, next time we got on the podcast, pull up this chart. I'm gonna try to steal the screen from you here real quick, Kevin.
Go right ahead.
All right. Give me 1 second. Okay. Are we seeing a chart right here, guys?
Hold on.
Not seeing it
down below.
Hang on, give me one more shot at this.
Blake, I guess you didn't get arrested last night.
I did not.
No. All right, it's not letting me share right now. Anyways, the chart was the kill shot chart. You guys might have seen this on Twitter or social media. It's put out by a guy, I'll give him credit, Evan Miyakawa. He does a bunch of analytics. Great website, actually, if you guys want to go dive a little bit deeper into some of this stuff. But he does this every year at a couple different points, and basically it's how likely are teams to go on a 10-0 run and give up a 10-0 run, right? And so down and to the right is the best, meaning you get a bunch of 10-0 runs and you don't give up a lot. Houston has been accused, rightfully so, at times this year of being stagnant on offense, right? And certainly that does happen whenever Jamal Shed is out of the game, or we're just not able to get downhill and get penetration off of that high ball screen that we usually initiate with. But last night was a perfect example of I think really what our offense is, right? With that 9-0 run, you're sitting there watching an offense that just kind of looks dead in the water. And then all of a sudden, I think it's sparked by a turnover, right? And our offense really is predicated on the ability to get out and transition a little bit and get a little bit of momentum, right? And at any moment, this team can flip a switch and go on a 9-0, 10-0 run. I counted last night, I think 2 or 3 9-0 runs.
Big game of runs last night.
By Houston. And that ended up being the difference in the game. If Houston doesn't get that 9-0 run, it's not even close, right? And so, I think, again, rightfully so, Houston can be criticized of getting stagnant at times. But, I think last night was just a kind of glimpse into, man, if this team can peak at the right time, because that's, I think, the scary thing for a lot of us, right, is, hey, this team hasn't peaked. We've yet to see a night where they put it all together and are just shooting. Maybe the BYU game was probably the closest we'd seen, I think, from a shooting perspective. But if they can roll into March and get things going offensively like they did at times last night, man, it's gonna be a fun tournament.
That was a big performance too for the road in terms of what they did the first 2 road games, obviously. And then the pressure. I know nobody wants to talk about it between the there you go, but between the fan base, the team, everybody knows they were playing Texas. I mean, I get it. Texas is, outside the top 25, I believe right now. Are they receiving votes? I think
receiving votes, but they're outside of it.
Yeah. So, even though, everybody wanted that game. Exactly. And they wanted to see what Houston would do on the road in a true hostile environment because, of course, those fans they were ready to rumble. And, they wanted to see how it would play out. And so, it was definitely a nail biter. They made both sides made everybody fight for every single thing they got, and there was times I thought it was in the bag, not in the bag. Oh man, this and that, and man, what a gritty performance. And I know the commentators kept talking about this is a culture win, and of course we definitely agree on that. The way Kelvin Sampson's developed the culture over the years over here, but. Man, what a true gritty win. This is their first, one of those hang your hat on wins on the road, especially. And I think this gives them a little bit of a confidence boost if they even needed it heading into next Saturday in a very hostile environment.
Yeah. I don't think we gave, this Texas game enough credit on the front end. Certainly, we all kind of knew it was a big game, at least from our end. Hey, last and probably only chance in the next at least 50 years probably to get a chance to play at Texas,
right?
Come out with a win. But I think we kind of underestimated maybe just how important this game was to Texas, right? When you really look at it, coming off of that loss to BYU, Texas now on the other side of this game is facing a very real reality where they could miss the tournament. And this is a good Texas team.
Yeah,
but in a really good team that doesn't make the tournament just because you don't have enough conference wins.
All right.
Yeah.
And Texas really now might be that team. So certainly they gave us everything they had last night. And listen, could it have been a lot prettier? Did Houston make a ton of mistakes? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, to crawl out of there with a win against a desperate Texas team at home for them speaks volumes, like you said, about the culture, just kind of where this program is at this point.
Yep.
Kevin, I think it was also on the other side of that. I think it was equally a must-win for Houston because now you bought yourself a little bit of breathing room. You know, you lose to Texas on the road. Now we're looking at this game in Lawrence as a must-win for Houston to stay in the race for a 1 seed. Now I think, you know, this is a game I fully expect to you know, be down to the wire. We can afford a loss here and still be on pace easily for a 1 seed as long as you split it with Kansas. I think you bought yourself a little bit of breathing room by stealing one from Texas in Austin. And like you said earlier, you know, there are no upsets on the road in the Big 12. Like, yes, Texas is not ranked, but we were only 4.5-point favorites. Like this was absolutely a game we could have lost. And in
Vegas
many ways,
knew it would be tight.
You know, yeah, in many ways we tried to lose it at some points, you know, but yeah, so you can't really overstate the value of this because now you look at it, you steal one from Texas on the road, you get Kansas, you afford a loss there, then you get Oklahoma State right after that, the worst team in the Big 12 by a pretty large margin. So you know, the value of that win just really can't be overstated for Houston, as well as the value of the loss for Texas.
Yeah. And let me piggyback on what you were saying, Blake. Is obviously it's an important win. We're preparing for tournament time. That's what I think that you know the regular season looks like for this team now. Is we're preparing for the tournament. And games like this, we need to be able to show that we can win games like this, that we can win those close games where you have to hit those free throws late, you know, in the game. And we did last night. You know, I said at the beginning of the season, you know, it's the free throw. That was one of the things that was like, I don't know, you know, close games in the Big 12. I don't know if we're going to be able to, you know, squeak some of these out if we can't hit free throws. But it looks like our free throw shooting is getting better in those tighter games at the times that we need them to make those shots. So this is definitely preparation for the tournament time. Playing these competitive close games. It's what we need. You can go in and win, you know, blow teams out 20, 30 points, but you're not really getting ready for those tough games that you're going to be seeing later on in the year. So just to piggyback on what Blake and what everybody is saying, we need games like this. You know, it's fun to blow everybody out, but this is really the games that you really can see just what your team is made of.
Yeah, you got to prove you can win those tight games.
Yeah, and hey, Kevin, maybe you can pull up those team stats from the game here because you know, and to your point about the free throws, something that Kelvin Sampson said, I think in his media availability prior to the game, or at some point this week before the game, he mentioned, you know, about the free throws, and he had a comment, something to the effect of like, you know, hey, we'd shoot better, you know, from the line if it was our better free throw shooters taking the shots, right? The part of the problem is, you know, we got a bunch of big guys taking a bunch of free throws and not Emmanuel Sharp and, you know, Jay Cryer. What really stood out about last night was you had gritty performances from the line from our big guys. Yeah. Javier Francis knocked down, I think, a couple big ones. All three of our big men, JoJo Tugler included, Jaywan Roberts, they all knocked down free throws in really big moments, which I think cannot be understated in this game.
Yeah. Still only shot 70%. Texas shot 75. We hit 14 out of 20. But you know, you hit them when they count, and that's what's important, right?
True. Roberts late.
Mm-hmm. 33% from three on the road, you know, is good enough. You know, certainly like to be a little bit closer to that, you know, 35-40%, but you know, given how poorly Texas shot from three as well, I think, you know, kind of a defensive battle, you know, certainly good enough to get the job done there.
How about how well JoJo Tugler's been coming on as of late, and last night big. He came up big in certain situations again.
Yeah, you know, so I actually had a note about this because I'll own it. I've been, I wouldn't say critical of JoJo Tugler, but I've been one kind of raising a flag and saying, hey guys, let's pump the brakes a little bit on the whole should JoJo Tugler start in front of Javier Francis thing, which I think, by the way, Javier Francis proved last night why, maybe he deserves to continue starting because he had a phenomenal night as well.
That's fair.
But, when I watched that game early, there was a play in the first 10 minutes of the game where, JoJo Tugler comes in at the under 4 timeout, right? That's when they make that first sub at 16 minutes, and very quickly gives up a rim run where he just didn't get back quickly enough after a made basket. They throw it over his head, and Dessou or whoever he was guarding, gets an easy dunk. And he came back out very quickly, and Kelvin Sampson was giving him an earful. Like, okay, here we go. The freshman, again, just not ready to play on the road in Big 12. It's going to be a long night. The two others, J1 and Javier, are going to have to go, 35 of these 40 minutes for the bigs. And he really grew up in my eyes last night. In the second half, kind of coming back in and giving some.
Francis was in foul trouble, right?
Yeah.
Yep, fouled out.
Yep, absolutely. But I mean, that putback dunk, some of those offensive rebounds off of the free throw. I mean, just absolutely gritty performance, and came up some huge moments late for us.
True. Yeah, the other big thing is the differential in offensive rebounds. JoJo Tugler, I think, was absolutely the unsung hero of that game. I mean, he sparked the 9-0 run I mentioned earlier was sparked because he tipped a ball after Sharp missed a 3, and then we get it to Shed, and the run begins. There are so many like his performance doesn't necessarily pop off the stat sheet. But there are so many tip out rebounds and huge moments that really sparked runs for us. And you got to remember that he's 18. Like, that's what I kept bringing up at the watch party I was at. Is he would be the youngest person in this room right now? And
he's
I know,
still growing.
On this, my age is kind of like one of the running jokes on here. I'm 19. I'm older than that guy. Like, it's incredible for me. So he's the sky is the limit for him potential wise.
Yep. He's getting some valuable experience too right now, and of course that'll come up down the stretch when they're in the Big 12 tournament, as well as the NCAA tournament. The minutes and the mistakes he's making now are going to come back, all the team, but obviously him as a young guy, that's going to come back to pay dividends later once they get further into the season and postseason.
Yep. I did also want to bring up, I don't think we can, we can have this conversation without mentioning Jamal Shedd. I mean, just an absolute hero performance. 25 points, 8 boards, 4 assists. There was nothing that the man didn't do last night.
Play him back home.
Yep. I don't know how much needs to be said about it if you guys have some comments on it, but I mean, just an absolute.
Here lately, when they've gone in those slumps, when LJ Cryer's been struggling, Sharp at times. Sharp's been coming on a little bit more, but Dunn, of course, when Dunn and Cryer have been struggling as of late, he has done a great job of stepping in and taking over and scoring and finding a way to score points when they absolutely had to have it. So, absolutely, he has been by far and away the MVP of this team thus far. And again, his leadership, the way you see him interact with Coach Sampson on the sidelines, brings up a lot of memories of Rob Gray. They can butt heads at times, and then just as quick, you could see them coaching basically through having having back then having Rob Gray on the court was like having another coach, just like it is with Shed this year. So I think he is absolutely going to be key between now and wherever this team ends up at the end of the year.
Yeah. The one thought I did have when watching, that is, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys remember, but like when LeBron James was young, right? And, could just get to the basket at any point. You'd watch a game and he would, just drive into the lane and, throw down the dunk, and you turn to your friend and you'd be like, man, why can't they just do that every time? Right. And that's kind of what it felt like last night, right? Was like, holy cow. Like, why, but I think Sampson and the team have been very intentional about not using this part of Shed's game unless they have to.
Right.
I think this is kind of a break glass in case of emergency situation. It's like the last night was an emergency, right? If ever you needed that performance, you had to have it. But it is a little concerning when we get to that point, because I saw down the stretch, right, where like once Jamal enters that alpha mode, right, everyone is deferring to him, right?
Yeah.
And it almost makes it where if he's not, when Weaver started kind of pressing him real tight, and
Weaver played great defense.
Oh yeah, no doubt. But he was pressing kind of tight. Jamal was having trouble getting to his spot a couple times. You'd kick it over to Sharp or to Cryer, and instead of making a move that they normally make, they just wanted it back in Shed's hands, right? And so
Shed was having a fight. He was having a fight to get free from Weaver. Like I said, tip of the hat to Weaver. He played tremendous defense, and he was making Shed work for those opportunities to get the ball in his hands late.
Calvin Sampson brought him up by name too in the postgame presser. He said Weaver was a nightmare defensively.
I bet Sampson, that's the type of defense Sampson looks for in his type of thing. You know what I mean? Keep that in the back of your hat in case Weaver hits the portal at some point.
Right. Yeah. Well, and one thing that he did mention specifically was, not just how athletic Weaver was, but that he knows how to use his athleticism.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really great insight from Sampson.
Mitchell, of course, stood out for Texas again last night, and that's not a big surprise, I don't think, for anybody, but his athleticism and some of the plays he was able to make stood out for sure last night.
Yep. And, another guy who I think kind of went under the radar as far as his performance was Tyrese Hunter defensively. I think his length guarding Emmanuel Sharp gave him some difficulties where, at other points this season, Emmanuel Sharp's been able to knock down a shot or two. Teams start kind of closing out really hard and running him off the line. That's what's enabled him to start getting into the lane a little bit more and create some of those, contact opportunities for free throws or distribute to others. And last night, anytime, Sharp would try to get into the lane, Tyrese Hunter in that length, he was able to close out, but then recover and prevent those dribble penetrations. And I think that really gummed up, especially that first 10 minutes of the second quarter or second half when Texas went on their run. That's normally a spot where you would hope Sharp kind of steps in and gives us some juice, and just wasn't there. So credit again to Tyrese Hunter there.
How about the back and forth adjustments made in the second half there between the two coaching staffs? It was really truly on display.
It's great to see.
In terms of in-game adjustments.
Yeah, when it looked like we forgot how to play defense there for a minute because of Texas adjustments, and then you're sitting there kind of having a little meltdown, and all of a sudden, I think Kelvin Sampson called that timeout. Texas goes on their little run, kind of readies the ship, makes some adjustments as far as how they were playing those ball screens, because I think for a while there, Texas was getting over the hedge that we usually run on those screens, and kind of gumming up, especially whenever we want the tag from the off-ball defender. It really made life difficult for us there early in the second half. And credit to Houston and being able to make some adjustments there. Kind of get us back into the rhythm of what we wanted to do.
True. Blake, any more thoughts to add on last night's game?
I think what sticks out most to me is defensively how well we contained Asmus. I'm using the word contained there because he still had 20. He shot 6 for 15 from the field. That's you'll take that, And
I thought that you Gatlin was about to bring up in terms of unheralded last night. He had a good game too, but it was a fight for him.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys where, especially in those back and forth offensive shootouts, like this is one thing I said a lot was during the game was I do not want to be in a shootout with Texas. He's just one of those guys who he's a spark plug, like he can start a run pretty much on his own. But the shots he hit short of the and one, I think in overtime, it might've been at the end of regulation. I think overtime, short of that, none of his buckets were really like crushing, like he hit shots, but again, that's why I say we didn't shut him down. We contained him really well. That's one of those guys who, I mean, you saw it at Oral Roberts for 3-4 years, and now you've seen it at Texas. He just gets going even whenever you're doing the right things on defense. So I think that was what I was most scared about, especially down the stretch, is if this guy gets hot, we're in trouble. And we just didn't allow that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And speaking of Abe Smith, I'll pivot this a little bit over to LJ Cryer, who I want to give some credit to, just the way he's come on defensively. I know people are giving him a hard time about, they needs to step up more on offense. And, I mean, look, I certainly think there's room for him to get better from the 3-point line back to where he was last season and where he's been in his career. But the way that he's stepped up defensively has been really phenomenal. And I think, obviously a very small window here, but last night when Shed had his 4 fouls.
Yeah.
And there were a couple possessions left in regulation or overtime. I'm getting it all blurred together, but there were a couple possessions where they had LJ Cryer guard Abe Smith and did a really great job of kind of containing him. To your point, Blake, use the word contain very loosely, but I just think where LJ Cryer was at the beginning of the season, he would not have been able to take that assignment. We would have had to gamble with Shed with 4 fouls on him. And I think it shows a lot about where Kelvin Sampson's mindset is at with LJ Cryer, based on the fact that he trusted him enough in that moment to go Abe Smith for a couple of possessions, which was huge.
True.
It's another guy Kelvin Sampson talked about in the postgame presser was LJ Cryer, and how there were those growing pains at the start, but like you said, he's come along so nicely. And even like to the note of like offensively, he had a good game against BYU. A little bit slower this week, but I think he's going to get out of this. I don't want to call it a slump, but this slow stretch very soon here. I mean, that was a tough environment to play in, but his progression has been encouraging.
Yeah. And lastly, one last note I had, I think there's been a lot of talk about how deep this team is, right? And how, we can go 8-9 deep. I think last night we kind of saw come tournament time, we realistically are probably 7 deep.
Yeah.
I think, when you see these tight games, the 2 guys who get minutes at home haven't gotten as many minutes on the road, being Ramon Walker and Malik Wilson. I saw Ramon Walker got 4 minutes last night at the end of the first half. And I'll tell you why he didn't get any more. I watched this play a couple times. So they hit Jamal Shed with the double ball screen at the top of the key. And then he, instead of taking one of the screens, he skips it out to the right wing to, I want to say it was Tyrese Hunter or maybe Mitchell. I think it was Hunter. And, kind of creating a one-on-one drive situation. And Ramon was playing the 3. So he's opposite, corner. If it was Emmanuel Sharp, he steps up into the free throw line. They get the roll right there for that last bucket on of the half. That's where Emmanuel Sharp, if you guys have watched this season, he's had like 13 interceptions where he steps up into that rotation and grabs the ball. And Ramon Walker's just a couple seconds late. They get the dump off to the roller. He dunks it. That's the end of the half. And if you guys watched after that, Kelvin Sampson was just in his ear after that for being a couple seconds late. And so, again, I just think come March, we're realistically probably a 7 deep team. And this was just a game that kind of highlighted, I feel like, where Kelvin Sampson's trust is at with some of these guys.
Yeah. So Houston gets the win. Big win for them, obviously, on the road. And thanks to the Big 12 scheduling gods, they turn around. At least they get a little bit of a long break here in between the Monday night game and Saturday. And they will be in Kansas, Lawrence, if I'm correct, and squaring off with the Jayhawks, which should be another one, part of a big triple header we were talking about right before we went live. Big triple header on the TV. Just some big matchups this weekend in college basketball, and they're right in the middle of all 3 of them. Early thoughts on Kansas, folks?
They're really good.
Yeah.
I think they've dropped a couple games all on the road, right, in the Big 12. Certainly this is probably not one of the best Kansas teams in the last couple of years, but I still think they are
very formidable,
incredibly talented team, especially offensively. I jotted down just so that we have this to talk through. Their starting five and kind of some stats real quick. So DeJuan Harris, 6'2", 7 points per game, 7 assists per game. Kevin McCullough, 20 points per game, 6 boards, 35% from 3. Johnny Furphy, 6'9", 8 points, 4 boards. KJ Adams, 12.5 points, 5 boards. Hunter Dickinson, 19 points, 11 boards, 60% from the field.
All right, Gatlin. So that's the starters, right?
Yes.
What about the bench?
Almost nothing.
Exactly. And I think that's where you're going, right?
Yes. Is that if there is a weakness to this Kansas team, it is that they are maybe even less deep than our 2021 or 22 team. Which team was the one with Kyler Edwards that made the Elite Eight run? Was that 22?
I think it was 21.
Was it 21? Okay, yeah. Whatever, that team that was like 5 or 6 deep. Where we would blow guys out in the first half and then just kind of run out of gas. And I feel like that's kind of what I see when I watch Kansas is they're a really top-heavy, very talented offensive team, but they do not go very deep. And when guys get tired, especially like on the road when they're traveling, it's hard to find guys who can step up. They've got one guy who plays 15, 20 minutes per game off the bench. I think his name is something Timberlake. I don't have any relation to Justin. No, Rob. But yeah, other than that, they are pretty much 5, maybe 6 deep.
That was the 22 team.
Okay, 2022. Yeah.
Kevin McCullough, man, how close for those with longer memories? How close was Kevin McCullough to being a Cougar back when, if I'm not mistaken, he started out at Tech, right, Gatlin?
Yes, and originally from San Antonio, I believe.
Yeah, so his family, both his mom and dad, were athletes at Texas Tech, and I remember having conversations during the recruiting process, and it was down to Texas Tech and Houston, and basically the biggest challenge for Houston was being able to promote themselves without trying to belittle Texas Tech to his parents, who both were athletes there. And the way it was at the time, if it was anybody but Tech and his family were that way, it was going to be Houston. So they lost out in the end of the legacy part, but it's funny to see him, for those with longer memories, come back full circle. Now he's at Kansas after being at Tech, and will be something they'll have to worry about on Saturday.
Yeah. And, one other thing about this team that I just noticed, the length again, Kelvin talked about this, right? Hey, don't confuse length and height. These guys are freaking tall. Right. So DeJuan Harris is 6'2". Everybody else in their starting lineup is 6'7" or taller. So, that certainly creates some matchup problems, especially when you talk about like, who is LJ Cryer going to guard, for example? You might put LJ Cryer on DeJuan Harris and let Jamal Shed give up, 6 inches to Kevin McCullough, probably.
Right.
Given his, offensive abilities. But it's going to be challenging. I think the one place where you actually gain a pretty nice advantage is inside, funny enough. Whenever you talk about our ability to go big inside and get, either JoJo Tugler or Javier Francis on KJ Adams, who's only 6'7". Both of those guys, I believe, have a significantly longer wingspan than KJ. So, again, from a length perspective there, you actually create a little bit of a mismatch. And at the end of the day, Kelvin said in his availability, I believe it was this morning or after the game sometime, when he was talking about the difference in length versus height. And, he said, fans watch that and they say, oh, we got a 7-footer, we're going to be so tall. Said, well, no, you're going to be slow.
Nah.
Right? And so it'll be interesting to see how Houston's athleticism and kind of defensive pressure against a team this big, this kind of seems like a battle of opposites here, right? And which is going to prevail from that perspective.
Is this arguably their toughest road game of the season?
Yeah, for sure. The fog is hard to play at.
Yeah.
I think a good game to look at is the Cincinnati game for Kansas. That's their last home game.
Mm-hmm.
And, Cincinnati's very middle of the road in the Big 12. They hung with Kansas the entire game. I think the key to that was they went on runs when they had to. They lost by 5, but that's a little misleading. It was free throws at the end of the game. I think the chart that was brought up at the start is a critical piece of information here, because runs are going to make or break this game. Our ability to go on them are like we can't afford a 4-minute scoring drought against Kansas, especially when like you've got people like Furphy getting hot for Kansas. He had a big game against Cincinnati. I think a big guy to look out for this game, again, because of that depth piece that was mentioned earlier, is Damian Dunn. He was really quiet against Texas. He didn't score. He's still looking for that real signature performance. But he's been solid all season. I think this could be where he takes over a little bit off the bench whenever we get a little bit deeper into the second half and Kansas starters are a little bit more winded. I've been waiting for him to really take off this year, and I think this might be where he makes his living.
Maybe he's that third guard, so to speak.
The one thing we need Damian Dunn to stop doing, though, and Kelvin Sampson said as much this week or last week, is stop with the pump fakes. Ever since I heard Kelvin say that, I can't not see it. Yeah. And you just notice he passes up good shots where he is open to try and get a pump fake and create some contact. And I think if he just commits to being confident in his shot, he's a guy who can score and doesn't need to get to the line to do so. I know that's where he's made his living, but he's a talented enough player. He can knock down shots. And if he will just, shoot with confidence, I think you're right, Blake. He can be a huge difference maker in this game coming off the bench.
So obviously that's what's on everybody's mind looking forward. We're going to do our best and try to maybe line up a Kansas 247 staff member for later in the week to have him break down this game a little bit better. But in the short term, that's kind of where things stand with the Big 12 basketball spot at the minute. Here's we reach about not quite midway yet, are we? About midway, yeah.
We have, I think, 11 or 12 games left, something like that.
Yeah, we're at midway of the Big 12 schedule. So we played 7.
Okay,
we got
that's
7
fair.
One thing, if I could, this game that's coming up, the one thing that does kind of worry me is Shed getting in foul trouble.
Yeah,
especially if he gets in foul trouble early. If he gets in foul trouble early, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah.
So he's got to do everything he can to guard them tightly, but stay out of foul trouble at the same time.
Yeah. Now the one thing
tough ask.
Again, as you talk about guys who might have the opportunity to step up here, I know we said he didn't get very many minutes against Texas, but Malik Wilson's length off the bench might come in handy defensively in this game, especially when you need to give Shed a breather. His ability to step in and guard one of these taller guards might earn him some additional minutes, especially if someone like LJ Cryer or Emmanuel Sharp or Damian Dunn can get going and provide some additional offense where, we can afford to kind of stash him on that end of the floor, so to speak.
True.
One more note on the Big 12 front. We're currently second behind Tech. They are in a dogfight with TCU down 7 right now, about to be halftime. So keep an eye on that. We may take first place outright tonight, which would be quite the statement. First year in the league, taking first place this late. I say late when you have games played in conference.
Blake, I was thinking the same thing today, is that where we stand right now in the Big 12 conference and in a tougher basketball conference, yet we're still showing people that there's no let up in our game, that there was no difference between AAC and Big 12 for this basketball team, that Coach Sampson is probably doing one of his best coaching jobs this year, I think, moving into this new conference. So I agree with you 100%.
Yep.
Yeah, I tweeted out to build the statue because it only took 3 games to adjust to, essentially what the SEC for football is. That's what we've got in basketball. It took them a whopping 3 games, and we've adjusted, and now we're not just contenders, but I would say front runners in the conference.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And what a conference has turned out to be, too, basketball-wise. I mean, people are going to start arguing soon about just how many teams are going to make it into the tournament now.
I think they were estimating 10 from the Big 12, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Which,
I think that's a safe bet, 10, maybe even depending on how it plays out down the stretch.
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah.
The one thing to note here, just as we're talking about standings and all of that, unfortunately, Houston does not get a return trip to Lubbock. And actually, speaking of the Kansas of it all, Bill Self had an interesting comment about this last week when they're talking about, kind of just the Big 12 standings. And, certainly I think there's a little bit of just bitterness in his comments because Kansas isn't, doing as hot as normal. But he's talking about with an unbalanced schedule, does the conference championship really mean as much, as it has in years past? And he makes a good point when you talk about like Texas Tech is at the top of the standings, but they've got a fairly favorable schedule when you look at it. If they don't drop this game to TCU, there's a realistic possibility that you could be looking at a world where Texas Tech is the 3rd, maybe 4th best team in conference and somehow wins the conference championship.
During the regular season,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now conference tournament is a different thing, but when we talk about outright, conference championship.
I mean, I saw the argument or just the discussion going back and forth on the board today in terms of what's more valuable in terms of winning this conference during the end season. It's a lot of value there to get through this schedule, or versus winning the conference tournament. Obviously, it comes with the automatic bid, but it's almost meaningless with a team with a conference this deep. But it's almost as if the in-season conference championship is more valued than the postseason tournament one.
I think it is. I think so.
I mean, what a gauntlet for any team that ends up winning it, regardless, right?
Yeah, no doubt. No, and certainly, and Bill Self said as much. I mean, hey, look, if Houston or Texas Tech goes on and wins the Big 12, then hey, they're certainly deserving of a 1 seed. Absolutely, whoever comes out on top of the same should get it. But it would be crazy that, and there's a world where Texas Tech is legitimately on paper, and into the eye test, probably the 3rd best team in the conference and could win the thing, right?
Yeah.
Just because of the way that the schedule is going to fall.
Yeah.
We'll say though, in this conference, nothing at all is guaranteed. So
certainly
any road game. We saw that with Kansas losing to West Virginia. Still don't know how that's possible. So
yeah.
Never know.
And I mean, look, the other part of this is the round 2 of it all. It's really hard to beat a team twice.
Yeah.
Especially if your return trip is on the road.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there are teams that are not very good that aren't at the top of this conference and are going to have some very shocking results, I think, in the second half of conference play. Just given the nature of adjustments and how hard it is to beat somebody twice.
True. Also, we wanted to touch base before we got done with tonight on the schedule release for the Big 12 football season next year. Basically, the full schedule is out now. I think Gatlin mentioned earlier on the community thread. Would we be remiss if we don't lead this off with talking to Blake about the opportunity for Houston in week 2 to go to Oklahoma, who I believe you grew up rooting for. We got to find a way to get Blake credentialed over there for Oklahoma for that game for sure, regardless, right? If he doesn't choose to be in the student section.
Yeah, I think I learned my lesson with Kansas State being in the opposing student section. That's on that.
Oklahoma's going to be rough. You might be better served getting credentialed than watching it from a safe spot.
For sure. The funny thing is my grandpa is a OU lifer. Took us to games growing up. My sister went to Oklahoma State. My other sister went to Texas A&M, and I went to Houston. So he took it all really personally. So
exactly.
yeah, I'll probably be getting an earful after that one. But
You have some interesting
we'll see.
Thanksgivings in the future.
That's right.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
Just remind him you could have gone to Texas, right?
Exactly. Talk about the ultimate.
Oh, I couldn't. I would have gotten disowned for that one. I couldn't.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Just remind him it could be worse.
Yeah.
So obviously the schedule we talked about a little bit on the site today. It shapes up pretty good. I thought overall, first glance type thing, nothing crazy, no major like back-to-back crazy pitfalls. And if I missed it, so be it. I'm open for discussion moving forward. But first glance today, I thought, fairly balanced between road and home and tough and non-tough. You got some easier non-conference stuff, and obviously on the road at Oklahoma is not going to be fun. But, I felt like it was a pretty balanced schedule.
Yeah, I agree. Especially some things to point out. No back-to-back away games, right? Now the one where we have a bye week in between, so I wouldn't call that back-to-back, right?
Right, that's fair.
Just in terms of the wear that it puts on guys. I also think with the second bye week being introduced, that'll be an interesting wrinkle just to see how that affects everybody. But I think it'll be positive overall for everybody. Getting Baylor at the end of the year, that'll be fun. Hopefully some, bowl eligibility stakes on the line for both teams.
Yeah. Obviously BYU to close the season out on the road is going to be a cold one. That's something
tough.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're a team that runs the ball a lot more next season, and cold weather won't bother us too much.
Blake, any road games scheduled early that you look at and you circle for you and your road crew?
For sure, TCU. That's not really a road trip for me though.
That's home for you,
Yeah. I'm thinking about Arizona. We'll see. That's quite the drive, but we'll see. I think the thing that sticks out most to me,
Houston to Arizona before, all the way past actually Tucson to just about the Grand Canyon one time with a couple buddies, and let me tell you, it's not an easy task between here and there, and even with your buddies and staying awake and goofing off, that's a tough one.
I feel like the Kansas drive prepared me for anything. That drive was awful. That was
Which one?
Fun. The Kansas one.
Oh yeah, Kansas.
Just grass.
I did see though they play Kansas in Arrowhead next year. That might be an interesting road trip for those that might be interested in checking out Arrowhead, right?
Yeah. I think what sticks out most to me is, short of Kansas, and you could argue Arizona, not so much now that they've lost their head coach, all of our toughest games are at home, which is nice. Iowa State's a great program. Utah's a great program. Kansas State's a great program, and they all come to TDECU. So it's, absolutely plausible that we could snag one of those, I think. It's also nice to open up conference play with Cincinnati, even though it's on the road, so to get your feet wet with somebody who's not realistically contending for the championship next year.
Somebody at least in the same boat as you.
Yeah, exactly. And then Baylor at home will be fun. That was, of the teams that we could form rivalries with, I would like it to be Baylor. So that'll be fun getting them back to back after the overtime win last year.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm also excited to play BYU. I kind of regretted not being able to play them first year in the Big 12. They're just a fun team. I mean, I think they've got a big fan base. I think it'll be fun, even just to watch on TV, like going into a hostile environment. I mean, that place gets rocking, man.
Yeah.
Especially for a big game. So if you've got, like, at the end of the season, not necessarily playoff implications, but there could be bowl game implications and whatnot, bowl eligibility on the line, for maybe one of us. Like, I think that would be a really fun game to watch.
There's a lot of history there too, in terms of just even in my time frame. I'm only in the last, 15 years or whatever. There's been a lot of history already between BYU. Obviously, they've played them. What was it, 2020 when Zach Wilson came in there before things got too bad and they had to shut down a lot of the back end of the season. I remember when Tony Levine was here, they played them once at NRG, which was a incredible battle back and forth. Like the first half of that game was probably a full 2 hours before it ever got to halftime. They had Taysom Hill and Van Noy was with BYU back then still, and they had some other, obviously some other guys I'm probably not remembering in the moment, but just incredible battle there. And I want to say it was a return trip as well that they lost. But BYU's there is some history there as of late that they've had that to lean on a little bit in terms of Cougar fans remembering how the battle's been as of late.
That's right. And Cougar on Cougar violence always,
blue Cougars and red Cougars, right?
Couple things to keep in mind for the schedule. The TCU game, away game, that's a Friday game. Okay. And Arizona, that's a Thursday game.
I believe those are both flex
games. Yeah, I was about to say probably flex, but
okay. Right. So TCU could be Friday, but it could be Saturday.
Okay,
depending on where everything stands when it comes up.
And the Tucson, the Arizona game could be Thursday, Friday, or Saturday.
No.
So they're both in those flex windows, not yet decided.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No, but good point. We will probably have at least one of those weekday
games.
Yeah,
I would bet one of them for sure gets flexed off of Saturday.
That's what they've said. The Big 12 part of this TV contract is that there will be more weekday games.
That's fair.
Yeah, and I mean we're kind of used to it. Yeah, exactly. In the ACC or AAC, we did that every year. So
yeah, I mean Houston football side, it's obviously the off season, but they've been rolling. They got pretty much there hasn't been a ton going on as of late with like transfer portal guys. Now the window's closed for just about everybody. I think even the extended windows should be just about closed by now for those that have had coaching changes. At this point, it's one of those. Now the classes have started. We talked about on the board today. I mentioned you might as well wait at this point just to see everything that's going to be available after that spring window opens back up. So I expect recruiting wise it'll be kind of chill, a little bit slow now through spring ball. We'll see what happens on the Cougars end in terms of anybody that chooses to leave after spring ball, seeing how the new staff and how the new depth chart plays out, as well as Houston looking pretty heavily for a few more additions after spring for the roster heading into fall. So that'll be important to keep an eye on. And then obviously they've got a jump start on the 2025 class. Blake, you were pretty involved in that first junior day. And I want to say I saw a couple guys already talking about being back on campus this weekend. So they may be having another event this weekend. If you haven't heard yet, I don't know. But I know Blake was pretty involved in tracking some of those guys that were on campus the first junior day a couple weekends ago.
Yeah. I have a phone call with Casey Smithson right after this, so that might be what he's calling about. But
yeah, we'll see how that one plays out. Also,
real quick, Rob, on that, Blake, might be a good chance if you have any just like not to say specific reactions, but could you give us a sense for what the overall response was that you've heard from the staff and how they thought it went, or maybe some of the kids if you've got a chance to talk to any of them?
Yeah, I talked to a few of them, and they all said it went really well. I'm trying to remember his name. There was a Texas A&M lineman commit who was in town, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name. He loved it though. I know I'm not doing my job great by not giving a name here, but
no, you're good.
Yeah, no, it was. I think it went about as well as it could have. Exciting. It's an exciting start because we're already going after. I mean, we only got one 4-star guy last cycle, and he was borderline with Maurice Williams. I think he got bumped down to a 3-star at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think he still finished composite 4-star maybe, or 247 4-star, but overall somewhere along the way he got bumped down, and I haven't looked yet to see if it was another site bumping him down and that bumped his composite score or what exactly. But big deal for him obviously coming in here. He's going to be one to keep an eye on early as they look for playmakers. Mm-hmm. It's interesting just where he fits into this new scheme heading forward. So like I've mentioned before on here, I feel like as they move forward the Big 12 recruiting, they're going to start getting guys each year who have that ability to transfer over in the first year on campus and see the field early in certain spots. Obviously, if it's a position of need, that'll be more important than others. And obviously, offensive line is probably not a spot you're going to see a true freshman roll in unless they find a way to just land some big stud. It's probably not as likely, but still, nonetheless, as they start landing higher rated recruits, you're going to see a higher rate of guys that might be able to come in and contribute earlier in their career and, be one of those 3-and-done type guys.
And on that visit list we had, it was either 2 or 3 four stars. And even if it's a guy who we have no realistic chance at, that visual is encourage.
Yeah, and getting them on campus, right? Exactly. Get them on campus. Let that relationship work. Especially the
same thing.
These staffs work ahead so many classes that at Tulane they've even been working on guys from the 25, 26 class already. So there'll be some carryover there, as well as Houston guys that they maintain a relationship with from the last staff to this staff. So I think they've got a good head of steam going into the 25 class for sure.
Yeah, it's the same thing with what we saw with DJ Lagway. I don't think anyone in the building thought we had a realistic chance of landing him this cycle. But with these higher rated guys who go off the larger programs, as we've seen for the past 5-6 years, there's huge turnover now. People enter the portal all the time, and having those relationships already established is vital in the transfer portal recruitment process. So again, we may not land every single 4-star who comes to visit. We won't land every single 4-star that visits. Might not land most of them. Having those relationships built, you never know when that guy could hit the portal next year, and now he's the crown jewel of our transfer portal class.
And something
that's why we want to go heavily after Lagway.
Something that goes undersold here when you talk about that, Blake, is getting these guys on campus is something that's new. Right. When and again, like I'm not trying to be the guy who, points the finger at the old regime and, oh, look how horrible they were. I'm not trying to do that. But what I've noticed immediately with this staff, we have had guys on campus at every single basketball game. They've been doing way more events, getting kids on campus. And you know what happens when kids come to campus? Their families come to campus.
Yeah.
You know what happens when you get families on campus? You get a chance to talk to their parents. And, in Texas, I understand that the coaches still have a ton of influence. But at the end of the day, you have to make inroads with those parents. I think back to Ryan Niblett, right? He was a wide receiver, was committed to Texas. Houston made a huge push on him late to try and flip him. And he wanted to. They had him committed. But you know who they didn't have committed?
Mom.
And when it got out to Brennan Marion was the wide receiver coach at the time that Houston was trying to flip him, he called Mom, and Mom shut that down.
Yep.
And I think that's something that this staff either understands more or at least is just willing to put in more effort on that front with all of these events and unofficial visits, and it just being a little bit more public and building energy around it to get those families excited about the idea of their kid playing at Houston.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Win the parents.
That's right.
Well, as I noticed up here that we reached the close to hour mark here, which is, I know it went by pretty good tonight. Pretty quick. Conversation's good. Anybody have anything else they want to touch on? We're going to try to shoot real hard to get a Kansas person on Thursday. I'd have to look at that. I'd have to look at that last comment there and see. Yeah, as far as we look ahead, I'm going to try to work to get a Kansas guy on Thursday and get him on here, and we can even do even if it's an abbreviated 30-minute deal and only a 2 or 3 of us type deal, depending on how everybody's schedules work out. We'll shoot to do that to get ahead. Look ahead with such a big matchup coming on Saturday. So anything else between now and then that you guys want to try to touch on, or we think we kind of touched all the bases tonight?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good as well.
I had to think about it, but I'm good.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So folks, if you've tuned in, appreciate it as always. Subscribe, like, share it, everything, all the above. Obviously swing by the site. We're obviously always on the site and active. look forward to probably I would bet Thursday would be a great night that we could get a Kansas guy, and we'll preview the Kansas game with him. If there's anything between now and then to touch base on, we'll do that then as well. And then we'll shoot to have some sort of follow-up, maybe even Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, somewhere in there. Excuse me, however that works out. So, yeah, other than that, I think we kind of touched all the bases for the evening. And we will see you guys next time. Appreciate everybody jumping on.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.